More than 4 billion people live across Asia, and we are telling their stories. In this edition, Singapore has eased many of its COVID-19 restrictions, but foreigners living in the city-state have mixed feelings about remaining there.
We obviously could not go back to Malaysia, so we had to watch the funeral online. It was very, very hard for us.
If I go back home, I lost my income. Then my family will be suffer.
Inspired by what he saw while studying in the Netherlands, Sri Dan decided to bring modern farming techniques back to China. But it took time for him to see the fruits of his labor.
就是当我需要去培训这10几20个大妈的时候，就能感觉到非常的力不从心。我们大概花了半年的时间，累计培训了100个人，最后只留下了15个人。
This country is amazing in terms of efficiency. They really take care of the well-being of the people, whether they are Singaporeans or expats like me who moved to Singapore. Bye! High five! High five! High five! High five! High five! Yay!
For over 5 years, Melissa and her family built a life here in Singapore. Their son started kindergarten here. Their daughter was born here. Traveling home to Malaysia was always a short and convenient journey, which meant that all holidays were celebrated with family and friends. But then the pandemic struck. A family that used to see each other every few months didn't meet for 2 years. Melissa's parents missed the birth of their granddaughter.
Pregnancy is a very fragile stage as well, right? We need our family support here and just to rally during this precious time. Yeah, so my parents weren't able to come here. Also my in-laws, they weren't able to come here. They are so excited for us expecting our second child, right? They couldn't see the whole process. I think breaks their heart as well. And now Rachel, our girl, is already 15 months. So you can imagine nearly 2 years where our family and friends back home has not seen, touched Rachel physically.
The worst point for the Lows came when there was a death in the family, and they had no choice but to attend the funeral virtually.
In 2020, my mother-in-law passed away. So she passed away of cancer. She was battling with cancer for a couple of months. And we obviously could not go back to Malaysia. So we had to watch the funeral online. It was very, very hard for us.
I actually have a close relationship to my grandfather and my grandmother as well, but unfortunately she passed away around this time last year. And I was really sad.
At the first opportunity they got, the Lows decided to move back. The company Melissa's husband worked for underwent restructuring, and he decided to take a severance package where he will serve a 1-year break before he finds a new job.
The pandemic has taught us so much about treasuring relationships, right? So that's why we decided to pull the trigger. Actually, we don't have to leave. We are sufficient here and we can actually stay here. But with my mother-in-law passing and also just to learn relationships are important. If it's not now, then when?
But there was one concern, 10-year-old Ryan. He would be moving right in the middle of his primary school education.
We asked him, if we do pull the trigger, you are likely to bear the most impact, right? Because he's studying and he's got school friends and teachers that he's attached to. In fact, he's been in the same class from primary 1 to primary 4. So most of his friends, his teachers are all the same. So you can imagine that level of attachment, they've built friendships since young until now they are, going towards teenager phase, right? But not to our surprise, he was very accepting of the decision because he's very social, as I can say, and highly adaptable.
Ryan will enroll in a new international school in Malaysia. His only friends are in Singapore, but the 10-year-old is choosing to look on the bright side of things.
I feel a bit sad, but I'm also excited. I'm excited to make new friends in Malaysia and my new school. I'm actually quite happy because when I go back to Malaysia, I'm able to see my grandfather again and my cousins. Yeah.
What sealed the deal was the announcement of a vaccinated travel lane, or VTL, between Singapore and Malaysia in November 2021, allowing vaccinated people to travel without quarantine.
Without the VTL, we will not go back. Because Rachel's 15 months. To be confined for 2 weeks in a hotel, I don't think I can cope with that.
The Lows booked their flights immediately, giving themselves only 3 weeks to say their goodbyes.
Singapore is a really great city. It's thriving, it has a diverse culture and community. We feel loved by the community here, with our friends here, and that's what we will treasure the most, relationships.
The Low family is not an isolated case. Frustrated by border closures and travel restrictions, many expats have chosen to leave Singapore. In December 2019, there were 1.42 million foreigners working in Singapore. Government figures in December 2021 show that since then, over 200,000, or nearly 16% of them, have packed their bags. Of that number, 32,000 were professionals, managers, or executives.
I think we have definitely seen an increase. More specifically, it was right after the lockdown restrictions were eased and borders were open for travelers to go home. So we have seen that pent-up demand has led to an increase of 1.5 to even twice as many moves as compared to the usual move.
MoveAs is a tech-based relocation company. They have helped over 1,000 clients move out of Singapore during the pandemic. Most clients, they say, moved to locations across Australia, New Zealand, and Europe.
There are a good portion of them who are moving because they want to be closer to their family, closer to their aging parents. Whereas on the other side, we have clients that are moving because they are repatriated, they are being let go by the companies. So they're going back home as well.
But not all foreigners in Singapore have the luxury to leave.
So this is our library, called Migrant Library Singapore.
Library Singapore,
Yeah.
which you helped set up.
Yeah.
For over a decade, Abdul Qadir Zilani has been working in Singapore and living in a migrant worker dormitory.
I never felt that I will go home because it will be much more hours. If I go back home, then I have to look after my family. And if I go back home, I lost my income. Then my family will be suffer, I will suffer. So I never thought about it.
Apart from being an avid reader, poet, and theater artist, Zilani loves the outdoors. Before the pandemic, all his days off would be spent outside his dormitory. However, in early 2020, after cases were detected in his dormitory, Zilani was moved to a hotel room where he stayed locked in for 3 months.
I had to serve 3 months in quarantine in a hotel room. So every 14 days after, they give me new notice for another 14 days quarantine. So I was a bit baffled because I live in a single room as a single person. I never contact with anybody. I was not even allowed to step out from my door. First few days, I feel comfortable because the room was very cozy. The bed was very nice. There was a flat LED TV, free Wi-Fi. But after a few days, I feel that the luxury without freedom is like crap. So yeah, it turned out very frustrating.
So you were practically in solitary confinement for 3 months. When was the darkest moment?
The darkest moment was Actually, my younger brother, after our first COVID test, after 14 days, he tested positive. But I tested negative. Even though we live in the same dormitory, same room, I tested negative, he tested positive. So that time I was a bit scared. I don't know what is going to happen to him because that time we didn't know much about the virus, right?
Stuck inside the hotel, Zelani could only learn about his brother's health through video calls. However, once his brother recovered, the virus and being isolated in a hotel room became secondary issues.
After 2 months, I was not afraid of COVID anymore. I was afraid of losing the job because I didn't know how many months is going to happen the same way. How many months how many months we can actually move freely and go to work. If it happen continue for 6 or 7 months, our company cannot run like that. So maybe our company will say, okay, we cannot do it anymore. You have to go back.
Has your impression towards Singapore changed because of your experience during COVID?
I've been here for 10 years, but I never felt that I am part of this community. So there is a lot of reason I never felt that because I don't have any Singaporean friend here. But for last 2-3 years, I voluntarily did some of the activities. So it's give me much more feel like, okay, I'm part of this society. I go out, I meet with some Singaporean friend and do a lot of the mobile library, or I do theater.
Or the poetry competition?
Yeah, to go to the poetry competition. So I meet the different people.
Then COVID came.
Yeah.
No more socializing.
Our socialism is already limited, and after the COVID, it's become more limited.
In 2020, in order to contain the pandemic, Singapore restricted public gatherings, closed schools, and made many employees work from home. As 90% of the cases came from workers living in dormitories, measures there were even stricter. In these dorms where up to 20 men share one room, residents were not allowed to step out of the compound or mingle among themselves. 2 years on, measures have relaxed. Vaccinated people are free to travel, return to offices and schools, and gather for meals. But for migrant workers, though more than 98% have been vaccinated, things are different. According to regulations updated on April 26th, out of more than 300,000 migrant workers who live in dormitories, only 25,000 of them are allowed to leave every weekday. On weekends and public holidays, 50,000 men each day. Workers have to apply to the Ministry of Manpower for approval to visit the location of their choice. Each outing is capped at 8 hours. As most workers usually get 1 day off a week, these limitations make it extremely hard for them to align meetings with friends from other dorms.
People could make new friends, meet old friends, and get a lot of things done and spend their time with people they know. But in these small groups, they're leaving the dorm with the people that they know inside the dorm, and it still prevents them from being able to see their friends and relatives who might be staying in different dorms. So it's good to be out of the dorm, but it still doesn't mean that they're able to see the people that they would like to see.
Debbie Fordyce is the president of Transient Workers Count 2. The non-profit organization has been advocating for migrant worker rights since 2004.
I think it's really hard for those of us who are not confined to understand the effects that this has on both mental and physical parts of our lives. When they talk to their families, all they hear is demands. They need money for the younger brother's schooling, for the children's education, for the parents' medical treatment, for the house that may have been destroyed in the flood. And so it's money that they're asking for. You have the number to call. For a lot of these workers, not being able to be with friends, family, loved ones, and to do things that are unrelated to work, it has a really devastating effect.
Zelani says he focused on exercise, theater, poetry to get him through difficult times. But his brother could not deal with stress that comes with being locked in and decided to return to Bangladesh.
Some people want to go home, yeah, no matter what is the situation, because some people are easily get desperate because of their mental weakness. And some people are, okay, no matter what is the situation, I'm going to face it.
So what could have been better?
I mean, what could have been better? I mean, it could have been better from the beginning. I mean, when the situation, the COVID situation all over the world, it was getting worse. So it was well known that the migrant worker dormitory is a very hot spot. So we live in a kind of situation, it's very ideal for the kind of virus to spread very easily. So government could have taken the necessary step before it spread into the dormitory, kind of, they could find a different place.
The outbreak among migrant workers was a painful incident. But Associate Professor Bilveer Singh believes it was the catalyst for change.
By ignoring, not looking after the conditions of the dorm, I think it became a national embarrassment. In a way, it was good. I think it was a wake-up call for all Singaporeans. Hence, they did a lot of things, giving them free handphones to call their home, watch cricket and watch movies and have parties. I think they tried to compensate as much as possible.
The general public and volunteer groups stepped up their support for migrant workers. And in September 2021, the Ministry of Manpower imposed new standards for migrant worker dormitories. Rooms must now be bigger, have ensuite toilets, in-room Wi-Fi, and only house 12 residents at most, with at least 1 meter of space between beds, for example. Despite all these improvements, however, restrictions on the movement of dormitory residents remain.
Being able to work, of course, has been a positive thing for the workers, but their almost complete isolation from the Singapore resident community has been absolutely devastating. The harm to them from keeping them cooped up is much greater than the harm to the community if they were to be allowed to go out. So there doesn't seem to be any real medical justification these days for them to stay confined to the dormitories without having access to the general community.
In a March virtual press conference, in response to a question about why migrant workers are still not allowed to move freely, Minister Gam Kim Yong said that going forward, the adjustment between the dormitory and the community is going to be in sync. He added that the task force will try to, as much as possible, move together so that there aren't a different set of rules for different settings.
I think it's a very difficult judgment call. Many people will say this was a necessary evil, compared to those who say it lacked humanity. But overall, the foreign workers are a major beneficiary of what has happened since then, in terms of housing, in terms of salaries, in terms of the way you look after the workers in one form or another.
In March, Singapore lifted more COVID-19 rules. Larger groups were allowed together. Masks were no longer needed outdoors. All vaccinated travelers can enter Singapore without quarantine. But the restrictions on migrant workers living in dormitories remain. Though Singapore claims to be moving towards living with COVID-19, when it comes to dormitory residents, it is moving at a different pace. For Assignment Asia, I'm Miro in Singapore.
Up next, the young man who gave up the chance to study a PhD and live in the Netherlands to see if he could break new ground at home.
就是想看看我们这些年轻人能不能在农业这个领域做出一点不一样的事情来。
爸爸，你再给我讲一遍番茄的故事吧。
好嘞，我的名字叫番茄精灵，欢迎大家来到番茄世界。我叫 徐丹，我是北京吉信农业的创始人。我在荷兰留学工作，大概待了有5年的时间。在那段时间呢，也真正的看到了荷兰是如何将这个高效的设施农业发挥到了极致，它的科研上面的这些成果是如何转化为企业的生产力的。 对，关键是每次就要摁到底儿，要消失。在刚开始，可能整个温室里面知道如何去完成里面所有农事操作的，可能只有我一个人。然后你们栽的时候可能也得挑一下，如果有些苗特别小
啊，就单爽出来了。
对，就是当我需要去培训这10几20个大妈的时候，就能感觉到非常的力不从心。我们大概花了半年的时间，累计培训了100个人，最后只留下了15个人。
我叫刘小红，然后我是附近的我家是南木家峪村的，我在这儿上班有4年多了。我在这儿呢，我的工作呢就是给西红柿就是剪叶子。我们这个西红柿呢，然后每周呢它是长3片，我需要的工作就是把它的底下这个叶子给它剪掉，然后它会着阳光更足，然后它的着色会更均匀。没在这儿上班之前呢，我是在家种地的，是一个地地道道的老农民。我们那个种地跟自从我上这儿上班了，那就是有太大的区别，就靠老天吃饭。老天爷要下雨呢，风调雨顺呢，我们收成就会好一点儿。然后自从就是上这儿上班了以后，我还能挣到钱，我还能学到很多我不知道的知识，这个是我太自豪了，真的。
实际上，我们国家的农业生产者还是挺难的。就是看到了发达国家的农业生产的现状和我们国内的生产现状之后，其实作为一个年轻人，心里还是有一些不平静的。这个不平静主要就来源于差距。所以为什么16年坚持要回国，放弃了这个读博的机会和在荷兰留下的机会，想回来去做这么一件事情，其实就是想看看我们这些年轻人能不能在农业这个领域做出一点不一样的事情来。你还记得这里面种的什么吗？番茄。所以爸爸是做什么的？
我爸爸是种番茄的。爸爸给我讲了小苗苗已经有多少天了。爸爸说最上面的2个最甜，对吧？
现在我们都知道，我们的耕地是红线。这个像有些作物，它是没有办法在室内、在设施里种植的，比如说我们的主粮。为了让我们老百姓现在要解决这个吃饭的问题，要保住我们的饭碗，其实我们也在思考，那如何能够释放出更多的土地资源，来保证我们的主粮的生产。有一个思路，就是把有一些不太依赖土壤种植的这些品类，比如说我们的蔬菜，我们给它换到别的地方去种。像这块河滩地本身对于农业生产来讲，它几乎毫无价值，它都是这个鹅卵石和沙，种不了麦子，它种不了玉米。但是反而现代的这种农业，我们这种无土栽培，它对土壤介质本身没有要求。想要说服更多的人认识现代农业，那么我就先在一个根本不能种菜和种粮的地方，让大家看看我们到底1年能够让它变出多少的蔬菜。 你看今年我们这个测试这个红色的樱桃番茄，你像这个品种，实际上可以发现跟我们预期的还是不太一样。真正的在有限的土地上，要想种出更多的食物，我们需要借助科技，需要借助设施，需要借助工业化的力量。我们前3年感觉非常之吃力的一个地方，就是我们没有人，我们不太希望靠情怀去留住他们，我们是需要让这个产业可持续，能够经营下去。当我们先养活自己，然后再去想办法养活别人，再想办法去带动这个产业。农业这个行业确实它的承上启下是跟其他行业可能相比还不太一样的。
番茄属啊，包括秘鲁番茄、智利番茄，
我还是希望我们这一代人，80后、90后，要做出一些60后、70后没有做出来的事情。我们要给农业带来一些新的变化，而且我们需要让这个变化让下一代人看见，让下一代人认识，让下一代人接受。最重要的一点是让下一代人加入我们。
花什么颜色的？
黄的。
番茄是什么颜色的？
红的。爸爸说，黄花结出的果子不一定是黄色的，可以结出黄色和红色，还有黑色。花到果子得有8个星期才能长出来，番茄长得是慢的。爸爸说我们要珍惜粮食。
我跟徐丹是在这个荷兰瓦赫宁根大学读研的时候认识的。最开始的时候，因为我们随着这个项目的启动，有很多的这个朋友啊，包括孩子们来到这个园区，他会去看，然后呢也问了很多有意思的问题。我们就想怎么能找一种孩子比较容易接受的方式来给他们讲这个植物生长的这些故事。因为本身我自己也有孩子嘛，正好有一个朋友，他们有一个团队是专门制作这种绘本的，我们就一拍即合。
你就可以观察观察，你看今天是这2个在开花，对吧？
那明天肯定都。
明天应该是它开花。
它还有它。
其实这个孩子的教育就跟我们做农业是一样的，它都是一个慢工出细活的这么一个过程。
农业这2个字，我一直认为它这2个字的分量非常的不一样。你从一颗种子到一碗饭，它中间得经历多少个风风雨雨，中间的任何一个失误都可能会让你颗粒无收。因为农业的背后一定是坚持，坚持的背后一定是坚韧，坚韧的背后一定是不放弃。其实这是很难的，但是这个事情不会因为难就不做，得有人去开一个头。我们让周围的老百姓得到实惠了，我们让周围的农民享受到了丰收的喜悦了，我们才能让社会重新的认识我们。我们非常期待这一天的来临。
Follow us on social media to contribute story ideas and share your thoughts.